The room fell silent the moment my son raised his glass and smiled proudly. "I gave all your money to my wife," he said loudly so everyone at the table could hear. A few guests laughed awkwardly. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Slowly, their eyes turned toward me, waiting to see how I would react. But I didn't say anything. I simply sat there, looking at my son, realizing that the boy I had spent my entire life protecting had just humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 67 years old, and until that night, I believed my family would always stand by me. But that evening, during what was supposed to be a cheerful dinner party, my own son showed me just how wrong I had been. What he didn't know was that the story he believed was finished had only just begun. For most of my life, I wasn't wealthy or powerful. My husband Daniel and I built everything we had through years of hard work. When we first married, we had almost nothing. Daniel worked long hours at a mechanic shop, fixing engines and coming home with grease still on his hands. I managed a small grocery store on the corner of our street. Some days we barely earned enough to cover the bills. But we had a dream. We wanted to give our child a life better than ours. That child was our son, Jason. From the moment he was born, our world revolved around him. Daniel and I saved every dollar we could. We skipped vacations, wore old clothes longer than we should have, and worked weekends when others were relaxing. Jason never saw those sacrifices. All he saw was the life we created for him. He had good schools, new books, and a home where he never had to worry about anything. Watching him grow up felt like watching our hard work finally mean something. Years passed and Jason became a young man. He went to college, started a small business, and for a while I believed Daniel and I had succeeded as parents. Then, 10 years ago, my life changed forever. Daniel died suddenly after a heart attack. One day he was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee, and the next day he was gone. The house felt empty in a way I can't truly explain. Every room reminded me of him. For months I struggled to get through even the simplest days. Jason visited often during that time. He brought groceries, fixed small things around the house, and tried to make me laugh. I remember thinking that Daniel would have been proud of him. But people change, and sometimes they change so slowly that you don't realize it until it's too late. 3 years ago, Jason introduced me to the woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Brittany. She was beautiful, stylish, and incredibly confident. At first, she seemed charming. She smiled politely and called me Mom from the very first day. But something about her made me uneasy. Whenever she visited my house, I noticed the way she looked around the living room. Her eyes lingered on the furniture, the paintings, the shelves filled with family photographs. Then she began asking questions. How big is this property? Did your husband leave a large inheritance? Have you ever thought about selling the house? I answered politely, but something about the way she asked made me uncomfortable. It felt less like curiosity and more like calculation. Still, Jason was deeply in love with her, and when he announced they were getting married, I told myself my worries were probably unfair. Their wedding took place the following summer. It was far more extravagant than anything our family had ever experienced. The venue was a large banquet hall decorated with flowers and golden lights. Brittany wore a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Jason looked proud standing beside her. I remember asking him quietly how he managed to afford everything. He smiled and said, "Don't worry about it, Mom. I've got it under control." Later, I discovered he had taken several large loans to pay for the celebration. But Brittany didn't seem worried about money at all. In fact, she seemed to expect a luxurious lifestyle. After the wedding, things slowly began to change. Jason visited less often. When he did come by, Brittany was usually with him. She dominated most conversations, deciding where they would travel, what they would buy, and even how Jason should run his business. It was subtle at first, but over time I noticed something troubling. Jason had stopped making decisions for himself. Everything revolved around Brittany. Then the requests for money began. The first one seemed reasonable. Jason said they wanted to buy a bigger house closer to the city and needed help with the down payment. I hesitated, but he was my son, so I helped him. A few months later, he asked for more money, saying he needed to invest in a new business opportunity. Again, I agreed. Then came another request, and another. Each time Jason promised he would repay me soon, and each time Brittany smiled sweetly and said, "Don't worry, Mom, it's just temporary." But the money never came back. Instead, their lifestyle became more expensive. Designer clothes, expensive vacations, and dinners at restaurants I had never even heard of. Still, I tried to not complain. Jason was my only child. Helping him felt natural. Then one evening he called me with excitement in his voice. "Mom, Brittany and I are hosting a dinner party this weekend. You should come." I was surprised. They rarely invited me to their social gatherings. But I agreed. What I didn't know was that this dinner party would change everything, and before the night ended, my son would say something that would humiliate me in front of everyone, something I would never forget. When I arrived at their house that evening, it looked like something from a luxury magazine. Elegant lighting filled the living room. A long dining table was covered with expensive dishes and crystal glasses. Guests filled the room, laughing and drinking wine. Brittany greeted everyone with her usual confident smile. But something about the atmosphere felt strange. It was as if the entire evening had been carefully planned. Halfway through dinner, Jason suddenly stood up and tapped his glass. The room quieted. He wrapped his arm around Brittany and smiled proudly. "I just want to thank my amazing wife," he said. "She's the reason our future looks so bright." The guests applauded politely. Brittany looked pleased. Then Jason laughed and added something that made the entire room freeze. "Oh, and Mom," he said casually, glancing toward me, "I should probably tell everyone that I gave all your money to my wife." For a moment, no one spoke. Some guests looked shocked. Others stared at me with pity. But Jason simply smiled as if he had just told a funny story. Inside my chest, something broke. My own son had just humiliated me in front of dozens of people. Yet I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I slowly stood up from my chair and looked directly at him. "No, Jason," I said calmly. "I'm not upset." He frowned in confusion. "You're not?" I shook my head gently. "Because the money you think you gave away wasn't yours to give." The room filled with whispers. Jason's smile disappeared. Brittany's expression changed instantly. "What do you mean?" Jason asked nervously. I looked around the room before answering. "After your father died, I placed most of my savings into a protected trust." Jason stared at me. "That money legally belongs to me," I continued, "and it cannot be transferred without my approval." Brittany's confident smile vanished. "The money you thought you gave your wife," I added quietly, "was only a small portion I allowed you to manage temporarily." Guests began whispering louder now. Jason's face turned pale. "And tomorrow," my final word came, My lawyer will contact you to settle everything properly." For the first time that night, my son looked like a frightened child. A week later, Jason came to my house. He stood at the door looking tired and ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I should never have treated you like that." I listened without interrupting. Then I sighed softly. "I still love you," I told him, "but trust takes time to rebuild." Jason nodded slowly, and as he walked away, I realized something important. Sometimes the people we sacrifice the most for are the ones who forget those sacrifices first. But that dinner party taught my son a lesson he would never forget. Respect is something you should never take for granted, especially from the person who gave you everything.